Hello, my name is Tom Sapp, Tom Sapp Photography. How you doing? We're going to talk about action photography here. And there's a couple rules that you really need to know. For instance, a lot of people don't realize that the lens makes a huge difference on how you should set your shutter speed. If you have a 200mm shutter speed, then 200 millimeters is going to give you a handheld image, or 200 on the shutter speed is going to give you a handheld image, and it's going to be easy to get it crisp. If you go below 200, handheld, you're going to show motion. So if you go an actual subject that's moving, your shutter speed is going to need to be a lot higher. But we're going to talk about the basic rules today, okay? Say you have a standard 60mm lens. A 60th of a second is going to be the standard for getting a handheld crisp image. And then you have the basic rules of 1/25th for standard motion, say medium motion, and then you get into fast motion. Your shutter speed needs to be much higher to capture that motion. So say we're talking about horses. I do horse photography occasionally, equine photography. I've shot saddlebred events, and one particular, I shot this world champion horse, a beautiful horse. And this horse, when it was in motion, was so fast, it was incredible. It was blowing my mind when I was taking this photograph, because I was looking at the camera, and the whole time I'm sitting here going, you know, what do I do? How do I capture this motion? Because the legs are just the way they move. It turns in a wheel, kind of a round motion, and it's very, very fast, like a tire on a car when it's going about 60 miles an hour. So to get this, what I did to capture this image, I first looked at my ISO, because the ISO, the higher up the ISO goes, the more shutter speed, the higher the shutter speed you can use. So you get a much sharper image depending on your aperture. I usually use 2.8 if it's a long ways away, whereas 5.6 is if something's a little bit closer to me, just because at 2.8 at a distance you get a little more room. If 2.8 was up close, it wouldn't be very much room to really get a good focus on a subject that's moving fast. It would be a little more difficult. So you might want to open up to 5.6. Now, for motion that is medium, 1/25th might be okay if you're using a 60mm lens. Now, on a 200mm lens, you might want to be at 1,000. You might need to be over 1,000. But it's just basically you want to set the shutter speed. That's what's going to be the determining factor to showing motion. You also have means of showing motion, which is panning. So you actually want to set the shutter speed lower. Say a 60th of a second is pretty good sometimes, depending on, again, the lens, the aperture you're using. But what I'll do to show motion is you want to pan the subject. You're panning from left to right. You can also use zooming techniques if the subject's coming closer to you or further away, walking at you or walking away. But the one most commonly referred to is panning. And what you want to do is you pick the subject while it's in motion, okay? Maybe if you got cars driving by and you want to practice a couple times, you can, just basically without taking pictures, you just follow the cars and get the basic pattern, the speed, because you want to keep the subject perfect in the frame. If that subject, and this camera is moving, you're showing that motion. If the subject in the frame changes position while you're moving, say the car moves, maybe an inch or two in the frame, it's going to show motion behind it, because you're showing motion. You're letting all that light in, and that shutter speed is going a lot slower, so that motion is going to show. So the trick is to keep the frame, or the subject, consistent in the frame. So you want to just follow, and then I usually do 2 or 3 frames just to be sure. So just to give you an idea here, we're going to do, it's basically click, 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 and the chances of getting a solid frame are pretty good. Now you can do where the long exposures, where it's click, and then you just drag it across, but you got to make sure that the lens is continuously moving with the subject, because if that subject changes, it's going to show motion and your picture is going to be solid blurry. Now the way to freeze that motion, if it's say at night and you want to freeze the subject and then show streaks of light, you can actually use the flash. You pop the subject with the flash, because flash freezes motion. It freezes whatever's in front of it. It's very quick, and boom, captured it. So you would set your aperture with the flash, and then you would set the streaks that you want, maybe at 1 second, 2 seconds, depending on your exposure time, or the exposure that you want, how bright you want those lights to be in the frame. And then you would basically just keep going to drag those lights in behind your subject or in front of your subject. You can do rear sync, you can do front sync, and what that means is the flash can either pop at the beginning of the exposure, so pop, and then you continue, and then it would drag lights in, or you can drag the lights in first, and then rear sync, pop, right there at the end. Tom Sapp Photography, this is showing motion. Thank you very much.